Okay. Sorry, guys. Everything errored out when I tried to do the stream. Everything just errored out. And I wasn't streaming, and I was streaming. I was streaming in one piece and not in another, and it was not okay. It's frustrating. But playback speed is at 1.25. So here we go. Back to this exciting clip art, which we can't see. But you remember in 1995, the best clip art we had was the paperclip. The paperclip. So let's see what they're going to say today. It's probably going to be the same questions we heard 3 days ago. Just warning you now. I'm not muted now, though, right? I'm still muted right now. I can't be muted right now. I can't be. I can't be. It's. Am I muted? I can't be muted. I can't be. It looks perfect. YouTube is not taking my stream right today. I'm just waiting for someone to tell me I'm not muted. I'm going to press play. Good audio. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our break point. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you. Mr. Sims, you can step down, and we'll take a 15-minute recess.
Would include the quality control sample, the extraction blank, and then substrate controls intervening the stains.
Right. Now, at the break, you and I reviewed your notes as to how long it took you to do that procedure with the 21 samples from beginning to end.
Yes.
And I think you began that on the 8th of September,
Yes.
half day.
Yes, that's what we figured.
And then September 9th, you said it took you all day.
Yes.
And then September 14th, another half day.
Yes.
And September 15th, at least a half day, maybe 3/4 of a day.
Something like that, yes.
And then September 20th, a half day.
Yes.
September 21st, a day.
Yes.
Altogether, between yourself and Ms. Montgomery, who participated in this process, how many days did it take you to process those samples from beginning to end?
From the point of sampling to having a typing result on DQ alpha,
Yeah.
that was about 7 working days,
7 working days.
approximately.
Can you imagine being able to process those samples, 21 samples from beginning to end in one day?
Actually call for speculation and
Sustained.
imagination.
Sustained.
Now let's turn to, what is this? H. Now, there are other kinds of precautions that one takes in terms of processing samples for purposes of forensic DNA typing, aside from the ones we've previously reviewed in terms of which kinds of samples one would handle at different times in different places.
Yes.
Now, let's start first with aerosols.
Okay.
Now, one kind of aerosol we've already discussed is the kind of spray that can occur when one opens up a tube.
Yes, if one has not spun it down, that's a concern because you can get liquid accumulating under the top of the cap.
And this would apply also to one of these lavender top tubes that contains reference samples.
Well, they're under vacuum, so yes, that's a concern when you open one of those for the first time.
And when you open one of those for the first time, one has to be quite careful about the aerosol of whole blood from the reference tube.
Yes.
And in pouring that out, let's say onto one of these paper cards, one has to take great care.
Well, one has to be careful about what else is in the laboratory, yes.
Now, aside from aerosols from liquids, can one have aerosols from dried biological particles?
I don't know if they're properly called aerosols, but you can have, for example, powdered blood, something like that. You have to be concerned about that.
Powdered blood would be small particles of dried blood.
Yes.
Now, if one were to take a test tube that contained blood swatches that had dried on the inside of the test tube,
Okay.
and then one takes a pipette, holds the test tube up and scrapes the blood stains out of the test tube with the pipette.
The swatches.
I'm sorry?
The swatches.
Swatches out
Okay.
of the pipette.
Okay.
You with me?
Yes.
Could that not cause an aerosol of powdered blood to fall on the surface over which the test tube was held?
Well, in my experience with that kind of a sample, you usually see some flakes. It's not as fine a powder, but you see more of like a flaky effect.
Could see a flake, but in terms of the dried swatch, could be an aerosol?
If, again, I'm not sure that's the right term, but if you're talking about
Particles.
airborne particles, yes.
Airborne particles.
Yes.
And the pipette itself is a flexible instrument.
Now, by pipette, do you mean one of those that has a disposable tip on it, or do you mean like a glass, can you,
Glass.
yes, well, it's not very flexible, it's glass.
Well, one of those thin plastic ones.
Oh, okay, yes, those are flexible.
Right, and they can flick particles.
Yes, yes,
Especially when you're pulling it out of a tube.
yes,
So that's another kind of aerosol, if using
yes,
that definition.
yes,
And these are particles of blood
yes.
from which nanograms of DNA can be extracted.
Well, if these are real small specks, I don't think you'd get nanograms.
Well,
I mean, if
again, how many...
Objection, Your Honor. The cutoff was answered.
I'm sorry, did you finish, Mr. Sims?
well, no, I was just going to say, if you had a large flake, then that would be nanogram quantities, but
Well-
not the kind of minute specks that I think you're talking about. Those are not nanogram quantities usually.
Well, let's go back to our discussion of specks,
Okay,
all right?
yes.
How small a particle can one get to derive 2 nanograms of DNA?
Well, from that, if it was solid blood, it would be a very small flake, something like that.
Now, let's turn to paper.
Okay,
When examining biological specimens, is it not an important precaution to change paper just in examining each item?
I think that is an important precaution, yes.
So just so we know what we're talking about, let's say you were examining a blood swatch on a white piece of, what do they call it in labs, butcher paper?
Yes,
After examining that swatch, it would be important to remove the paper from which the swatch came before then examining another swatch on that paper.
yes, in other words, you wouldn't want to examine 2 swatches on the same piece of paper. I would agree with that.
All right? And in terms of, let's go back to our situation with the test tube being, with the dried swatches being scraped out with the pipette
Okay,
and paper below the test tube.
okay.
Would it not be an important precaution against cross-contamination to change the paper every time you removed a set of swatches?
I'm having a little trouble conceptualizing what is that swatch then being directed into? I need to
All right.
get clarification on that.
There is paper, butcher paper covering a table,
Okay,
section of a table,
okay,
and then on top of that butcher paper is a rectangular bindle.
okay.
You saw bindles in this case, did you not?
I did.
Bindles from the Los Angeles Police Department.
Yes,
Bindles that contain swatches.
yes,
I ask you to assume that the bindle is on top of the butcher paper
okay,
and that the test tube with the dried swatches is being, the swatch is being scraped out of that test tube with the pipette, aiming for the bindle surrounded by the paper.
okay.
Would it not be sound, fundamental laboratory practice to change the paper underlying the bindle every time you moved to a new item?
I think I would do that. I don't know if it's absolutely mandatory to do that because the bindle does act like a new piece of paper if it's big enough. But I think it would be a good idea to put a clean piece of paper underneath each bindle, yes.
Well, the particles or the aerosol may not hit the bindle.
That's correct.
And to protect against cross-contamination from those particles, it would be sound practice to change the paper.
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
Well, I think it would be a good idea to either change the paper or to put like a wipe or something, some kind of tissue over that paper so that you covered that area, yes.
Instruments. Withdrawn. Before I move from, now, in your laboratory, is it not part of your protocol that not only that paper underlying an item that you just examined, right, should be changed every time you examine another item of evidence?
Yes, I would do that,
Isn't that part of your protocol?
yes.
And when you're cutting or sampling an item, you would change the paper for each
Yeah.
different item.
Yes,
And that would apply to a blood swatch.
yes.
That would apply to cuttings from a glove.
Well, now, between each cutting, is that what you're saying? I believe that's what I did in this particular case, yes.
Now, instruments. There are various kinds of instruments that are used to manipulate biological evidence in a crime lab.
Yes,
Tweezers,
yes, or forceps is what we call them in the scientific world.
forceps. And is it important to make sure that you clean all instruments that are used in manipulating biological specimens?
Yes,
Gloves. Is it part of your protocol to change gloves every time you handle a different item of biological evidence?
I don't believe I change my gloves after every item. What I do sometimes would be usually to wash my gloves. And certainly if I had any indication at all that I may have something on my gloves, I would discard them right away. And after, for example, I've been working around the laboratory and handling doors and things like that, I would change my gloves also. But I don't believe I would change my gloves necessarily between each separate item.
Did you change your gloves between each swatch that you handled in this case?
I don't believe so. I don't think so.
Would you agree that not changing gloves, let's start this way. In handling a wet swatch, would you change your gloves between handling each swatch?
Objection, handling is vague, Your Honor.
Rephrase.
All right.
What,
In
what part of the process are we talking about?
removing a swatch, wet swatch from a plastic bag, would it be sound practice to change gloves between handling each set of wet swatches?
Objection, removing is vague, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Well, I think if you mean by the scenario we talked about earlier where you're sticking the tube up in there, I think if there's any danger that you would have blood getting onto that tube, then I think that, and then you touch that tube, for example, that would be a good idea to change your gloves, yes.
And in the process we talked about where you're scraping the swatches out of the test tubes onto the bindle and paper, between each set of evidence items, would you change your gloves?
Well, now there, as you're explaining it, you're sort of, you're creating a situation where it's coming down onto your gloves. I'm not sure that the criminalist might have the material out in front of him or her so that they're really not having the particles come down onto the gloves. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, would you, as a precautionary practice, looking at the process we're talking about, scraping the swatches out of the tube,
Okay.
all right, dried swatches out of the tube, would you change your gloves between handling each of those items?
No, I don't think so, because I think one could reach into that tube and dislodge that sample in such a way that then one wouldn't get powder onto the gloves. I don't know that I've ever done that procedure, so it's hard for me to evaluate it on my own experience, but I think at least one might wash one's gloves after each item. That would probably be a good idea.
So your testimony then is you either change your gloves or wash your gloves between each of these items.
I think that would be a good idea, but again, it depends on how exactly that manipulation is performed.
Maybe I ask you this question, let's make sure I ask you this question. Did you either change your gloves or wash your gloves between handling each swatch in this case?
Objection, compound.
Sustained.
All right. You testified a second ago that you didn't necessarily change your gloves between each item.
That's correct.
All right. Would you, between handling each of the swatch items in this case, have either changed your gloves or washed your gloves?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
So you were either using a new set of gloves when you handled each separate item, or you were using a set of gloves that you'd washed.
Yes, I was trying to save the taxpayers a little money by washing them.
Okay. Now, agree that with respect to, well, actually, we move to I. Viewing each of these different factors in terms of cross-contamination, okay?
Okay.
Starting to the right hand of that white line, right?
Okay.
The first one, we were talking about degraded samples,
Okay.
right? And we agreed that in handling degraded samples, that is, the fact that samples are degraded creates a risk of cross-contamination in and of itself.
Yes, there is greater risk with those samples.
And handling a reference sample, now looking at the test tube plus one, all right?
Okay.
Reference sample in the same area during the same period, either by pouring off sample from the, popping up the top of the tube, pouring it onto a card in the same area during the same period, one is handling evidence samples. That kind of situation can increase the risk of cross-contamination.
Objection. Period is vague, Your Honor.
Yes.
And handling samples from a suspect and a victim at the same time can create a risk of cross-contamination of samples.
Can we clarify a little bit about samples from a suspect and a victim? I think we had a little more detail when we discussed that earlier.
Well, you recall that discussion. It's represented by that logo without reviewing it all.
Yes, yes, I agree with that.
And then we talked about samples represented by that scale of samples with high DNA concentration and low DNA concentration.
Yes.
And then we talked about samples from different crime scenes.
Yes.
And we talked about handling many samples at the same time.
Yes.
Now, with respect to all those different contamination factors to the right of the line, those represent, in a sense, situations that can raise the level of risk in terms of making an inadvertent transfer of cross-contamination.
Yes.
Now, looking to the factors on the left-hand side,
Okay.
if you combine the creation of an aerosol,
Excuse me, counsel. This witness has never adopted your characterization of aerosol. Airborne particles, perhaps, but
Thank
not
you.
aerosol.
airborne particles, represented by the clip art of fireworks.
I like that.
Thank you. All right, talking about airborne particles, all right,
Okay.
combining that with any of these other situations to the right of the line, that is a sort of a mechanism of transfer that would increase the risk of cross-contamination.
Yes.
And the paper. You recall our discussion about not changing paper.
Yes.
If you combine not changing paper with each of those situations, that is a mechanism of transfer that can increase the risk of cross-contamination.
Yes.
And with respect to the Bunsen burner representing the cleaning of instruments, if one does not adequately clean instruments, that can be a mechanism
Walter.
of transfer that facilitates cross-contamination, raises the level of risk in the other situations to the right of that white line.
Yes.
And with respect to gloves, either not changing gloves or washing gloves, okay, between samples, combined with any of those other factors to the right of the line, can become a mechanism of transfer for cross-contamination.
Yes.
Let's turn to note-taking.
Okay.
Your protocol has a section dealing with note-taking.
Yes.
Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I am.
Do you rely on it?
Yes, I do.
Good. Would you agree, and I'm now referring to section 7.3 of your protocol, that the functions of note-taking are to support the conclusions in the laboratory report, to permit internal review of the work product, to allow reevaluation of the data by outside scientific observers, and to provide a foundation for the introduction of work product into court?
Yes.
Do you agree that notes are to be made at the time the work is done, and to accurately reflect what was done?
Yes.
So the way that you filled out notes in this case is that you would perform a procedure, and then after performing the procedure, you would write down what you did,
Yes.
and write that down in detail,
Yes.
including, for example, changing or washing gloves.
Yes, in some instances, I did that early on, and then as things became more routine, I just kind of knew that that was part of the routine.
And would you agree that for casework, analytical notes should be recorded on DNA case note forms or the appropriate run sheet or checklist? Each page should be numbered,
Yes.
dated,
Yes.
and initialed by the analyst.
Yes.
And handwritten notes should be made in ink.
Yes.
It's a fundamental. You've been working in criminalistic labs for how long?
Almost, well, 19 years.
All right. And when you make your initials on various pieces of packaging, you do them in ink.
Yes, it would be rare that I'd ever have a pencil around these in my lab.
And corrections
Yes.
should be made by lining through the original, so the original text is still visible,
Yes.
and initialing the correction.
Yes.
And that's a precaution that criminalists take to ensure chain of custody.
Yes.
Objection, that's argumentative, also relevant beyond the scope. Overruled.
And with respect, do you rely on the section of your protocol entitled Documentation, section 3.3?
Yes, I do.
Would you agree that note-keeping is defined as documentation of work is performed?
Yes.
And as performed means both that the record is made at the time the work is done,
Yes.
and what is recorded is what is actually done.
Yes.
Now, you reviewed bindles from the Los Angeles Police Department in this case,
Yes.
bindles that contain swatches,
Yes.
and the initials on those bindles were in pencil.
I think that most of the DF ones were in pencil, as I recall.
And those bindles didn't have dates.
I think a couple of them did, but I don't. I certainly. You asked me earlier if I saw any with the June dates, and I don't think I had any with the June dates on them. If that's your.
Did you see one bindle with the initials AM for Andrea Mazzola? Any of the swatches you had?
No, I don't recall seeing AM on any of those bindles.
Now, you have a manual for your laboratory.
Yes.
As we agreed before, it's detailed.
Yes.
Everyone in the laboratory is familiar with that manual.
Yes, they should be.
And the provisions of that manual are not just guidelines that analysts are free to ignore if they feel they want to.
That's correct. They cannot ignore those.
And would you agree, as an expert in crime lab procedure, that being careful and paying attention to detail in the handling and the documentation of samples is very important?
Yes.
And that being sloppy about the handling of biological samples with respect to DNA testing is something that should be avoided
Yes.
because of the dangers of cross-contamination. At least that's certainly one of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons. Yes.
And when we talk about inadvertent transfers, would you agree that sometimes one makes accidents in the handling of samples that one is aware of?
Yes.
You might be aware that you saw some particle of blood, for example, on a glove,
Yes.
but accidents can happen that you're not aware of
Yes.
in the handling and the manipulation of samples.
Yes.
And it is for that reason that it is important to follow the precautions that we reviewed so far this afternoon.
Well, there's a lot more to that, but yes, that's part of it.
And in terms of at the end of a DNA analysis, when you're looking at an autorad or a typing strip, and there is some indication in your controls, positive control, negative control, or quality control sample, of an irregularity, it is often difficult to go back and figure out what stage of the process went wrong that caused that irregularity.
It can be difficult, but one can take a systematic approach to that and track back and perform the different parts of the experiment. And also, if one has, for example, extracted DNA or raw material, one can repeat that analysis. That could be part of the way of tracking that back. You may not figure out exactly what happened, but then you could still get the correct result, for
For
example.
example, on these DNA typing strips for PCR, one sees dots.
Yes,
And when certain dots light up, that's an indication that perhaps some amount of DNA associated with an allele has been detected.
yes,
But sometimes dots can light up, and one wonders whether or not that is DNA that really comes from the starting material that you're examining, as opposed to something that may be just what's called an artifact in the process.
Objection, compound.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
What is, can dots light up on that PCR strip and it not be the DNA from the starting material?
yes. That could happen, for example, if you had a mix-up of sample or something like that. Yes,
Or it could happen from some kind of contaminant that gets into the reagents.
yes,
It can happen from some cross-contamination in the handling, in the extraction, cutting and extraction of the samples.
yes,
But when one starts the reconstruction from looking at that dot blot,
okay.
it can often be difficult to figure out exactly what occurred to cause the dot to appear.
Sometimes it is difficult, yes.
Now, let's talk for a second about your training in forensic DNA analysis.
Okay,
You testified that you started at the Department of Justice in 1990.
yes, in January of 1990.
And was that your first exposure to doing forensic DNA analysis?
No. Well, as far as doing it, my first training in DNA went back to 1988. But that was a class that I took in how to perform DNA analysis. But my first job involving DNA analysis was 1990, yes.
And that's when you started at the Department of Justice.
Yes,
But you did not begin to do casework in January of 1990.
that's correct.
You began a process of training.
Yes,
And could you describe for us, and you didn't, I think you told us in direct examination that you didn't begin doing casework until May or June of 1993.
92.
92, I'm sorry. So how long was that from the time you first started at the DOJ lab?
About 2 years, a little over 2 years.
But before you started at the DOJ lab, did you have extensive experience in crime lab procedures?
Yes.
How many years?
Well, as part of all the time that I was in criminalistics, so that would be, what now, about 14 years of experience in criminalistics before I went to the Department of Justice, something like that.
Doing conventional serological testing
Yes,
and dealing with biological specimens.
yes,
But you did not begin doing casework until you finished 2 years of training.
that's correct.
And when you did your training, did you receive guidance from people that had PhDs or doctorate degrees?
Yes,
People who had training in molecular biology?
yes,
People who had doctorate degrees in population genetics?
yes,
And you, I think the phrase you used on direct examination when Mr. Harmon was asking you why it took so long, you said something to the effect that it's important to know what makes a good blood stain into a bad blood stain.
yes. That was part of, I think, when we were discussing our environmental abuse experiment, where we exposed blood and semen stains to a wide variety of environmental conditions to evaluate whether or not we would get the right or the wrong answer.
And so it would be important for criminalists who are collecting, packaging, processing, extracting, performing DNA analysis to have an understanding of what causes degradation in samples.
Objection, mistakes, testimony, it's argumentative.
I'm asking if that's true.
Yes, I think that would be important, that people collecting biological evidence should have some basic understanding.
They should have a basic understanding of what can cause cross-contamination in
Yes,
forensic DNA analysis.
yes,
And this I think you indicated is only the 8th time you have testified in court about your forensic DNA work.
Oh, I think this is now 9.
9. Now, you talked on direct examination about laboratory accreditation.
Yes.
You indicated that the Department of Justice is accredited by what's known as ASCLD Lab.
The American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board.
Yes. Now, this is a group of people that are doing forensic work.
Yes.
And I think you said that, I think it was to save me some time, that with respect to the recommendations of the National Research Council of the National Academy of Science in their book, DNA Technology in Forensic Science, that you don't rely on any of it.
Objection. That misstates the testimony that he gave.
Overruled.
I think you, as I understand Mr. Harmon's question was, did I rely on anything in there to reach the conclusions that I reached in this case?
Oh, okay. Are you familiar with the recommendations in that book concerning laboratory accreditation?
Objection. It's irrelevant. It's hearsay under 721.
Overruled. You
No
can answer the
foundation.
question. You can answer the question.
I,
Yes or no, are you familiar with it?
no.
Didn't read that chapter?
Well, I don't remember the administrative stuff.
Do you recall reading a chapter 4 called Ensuring High Standards?
Yes, I remember this chapter.
May I approach? Oops. Now, do you know whether you would rely on any part of this chapter as a, in terms of your expertise in criminalistics?
Objection. It's vague. What he would- It's irrelevant what he would
I'm
rely
trying
on.
to save time.
It's hearsay. It's foundational. 721.
Overruled.
I think you'd have to ask me on a point-by-point basis,
Some you would rely on, some you wouldn't.
depending on what that section says.
Mr. Scheck, why don't we move on? I'm not overly optimistic on this line of questioning.
Well, let me just try a little bit on this.
Well, you haven't got, we don't have,
Objection.
wait, I'm discussing this with counsel. I'm trying to give him some guidance. Why don't you sit down? I'm not overly optimistic, Mr. Scheck, given the lack of the foundation at this point. So why don't we move on?
I've located the sentence. Let me just ask this one and then I'll move on around. Let me call your attention to...
Ask him if it refreshes his recollection
Yes.
whether or not he relied upon that.
Yes, that's exactly what
No, don't read it. Let him read
I'm
it.
not. I'm pointing him out. Let me just call your attention to the sentence on page 102 in the section dealing with establishing standards in forensic DNA typing, starting at the bottom of the page, moving into the top of page 103.
He's reading parts of the
I'm
book
calling
right
his
now.
attention.
Don't.
Just
Go ahead and read it.
Just read that to yourself and then tell me whether you rely upon that section.
Objection. It's vague and relied upon it in forming what opinion?
Overruled, counsel.
Have you relied upon that in forming your opinions with respect to accreditation of laboratories?
No.
Proceed.
Now, do you believe, you were asked questions about clinical medicine on your direct examination and DNA typing in clinical medicine.
Yes.
Right. Are you aware of standards or regulations in clinical medicine and how they compare to the standards on forensic laboratories?
No.
So the issue is, you know forensic standards,
Yes.
but you're not aware of the standards required of laboratories who are using DNA typing in clinical medicine.
That's correct.
Process of preparing your laboratory for ASCLD accreditation improved in some measure the work in the laboratory.
I don't think it necessarily improved our work product. I think what it did was to bring it all together for us, and I think it address some issues. I mean, when you talk about accreditation, this would even include safety issues, evidence handling issues as far as security of the laboratory. All those things are part of it. I don't think in a particular way that it changed our work product. I don't think it changed the quality of our product. I think what it helps to do is to tell the users of our services that we are meeting certain minimum standards, and so it's saying that we meet those standards.
I'm not asking you, I think you were asked on direct examination, were your results as reliable before the accreditation process as after? You recall that?
Yes.
There have mistakes in testimony.
Not asking you that question.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of cases, are you aware of making a mistake in any of your forensic DNA typing cases to this point?
No, I'm not aware that I've made a mistake in any of my cases.
Right. On the other hand, would you agree that the process of accreditation, which I think you've indicated, you review all the different techniques in your laboratory?
Yes.
You look at how various people in the laboratory handle biological evidence.
Yes.
You would look into some of the factors that we discussed this afternoon in terms of trying to prevent cross-contamination and precautions that ought to be taken.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing that's done during the accreditation process.
Yes.
And during the accreditation process, did you work on that manual that we've talked about?
Yes, I think we had to put together the manual as part of our accreditation, yes.
And in putting together the manual, you went through the details of exactly what people did,
Yes.
and people learned exactly what procedures ought to be followed with care.
Well, people didn't learn that from the manual. We knew those things, and so we incorporated those things into our manual to say that, as a reference, that this is how we're doing things, and we're telling people that this is how we're doing things.
Right. And maybe some people in the laboratory had one way of doing things and other people had others?
Well, we were actually pretty much all on the same wavelength as far as those concerns, but there were some minor things, yes, that we improved upon.
And in the process of accreditation and in the putting together of this manual, what happens is that you set out uniform standards that you can be sure everyone associated with that crime lab will follow.
Well, I can be sure that they know that they're supposed to follow those, yes.
Right. And you would agree that that's a benefit of going through the accreditation process?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Now, on direct examination, there was some discussion of your role in what's known as certification.
Yes.
And accreditation is something that's done for the whole laboratory, correct?
Yes.
But certification is a process where an individual criminalist is examined.
That's correct.
And I think you told us something about being on the board of American, what is the title of that?
I was on the board of examiners that, for example, I would work on certain test questions. I would also proctor the examination.
Mm-hmm. And this would be for the individual analyst, the certification test.
Yes.
And would you agree that the process of preparing for the test has the effect of improving the work of an individual analyst?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement. In other words, part of that is the educational benefit that one gains from preparing for that sort of examination. Yes.
I mean, no matter how experienced one is, you can always learn some new technique that will improve your level of practice.
Yes.
So you would agree it's important that criminalists who work for a number of years in the field be certified?
I think it's important that the criminalists move towards certification, yes. Our field has been slow to do that, and we are now coming online with certification more and more.
Do you know Dennis Fung?
I know him from watching him in this case, yes.
Do you know if your organization has certified him through its examinations?
I don't.
It's irrelevant, beyond the scope. Sustained.
Are you familiar with the guidelines for the collection of DNA evidence that was published by the FBI?
Yes, I think, was that the one that Dr. Lee was a co-author of? Yes.
All right. Have you reviewed that document?
Yes.
All right. Do you rely on it?
Objection is vague, rely on what?
Sustained
What reason?
All right. Is there anything you saw in that document you don't rely on
Objection, still vague.
for purposes of methods that you, in your expert opinion, would believe are sound for the collection of evidence items for purposes of forensic DNA analysis?
I don't recall any statement in there that I disagreed with, no.
Now, the last part of this section of our discussion here, Mr. Sims. I have a series of photographs, Your Honor, that I'd like to mark.
1160 A through,
Yeah, maybe 1168 A, B,
Syrup.
C,
Regular
D,
French toast
E,
with syrup, and it's
and F.
delicious.
all right, 1160 A
And
through.
you and I reviewed these photographs, did you not?
Yes, we looked at them just briefly.
And these are photographs of you in your laboratory.
Yes, these were taken a few weeks ago by Dr. Blake.
And these photographs were show you at different stages of the process by which you, I guess, initially handled and cut the samples in this case.
Yes, Dr. Blake asked me to reconstruct and just sort of go through what it looked like as I was processing the samples in this case.
And could you review those and suggest which order we ought to go through them?
I mean, you didn't put those in order, A through?
I think we did, but I'm only asking him whether I have the order right. I got you.
How about if we renumber them in the order we're going to use them? Renumber them, re-letter them in the order we're using
Yeah,
them.
I'm going to do that.
All right.
Let me show you B.
Okay?
We're going to start with B.
Start with B. A is a surprise. Could you describe for us what's depicted in A?
Yes, those are, I believe, my hands. What I'm showing is the process of how I'm cutting out a sample here. This is just a blank card, obviously, it's a white card. I'm showing that I have a laboratory bench that I have bleached now. I have a...
Well, let's just stop right there. The laboratory bench is the bench that blue, what would you call it, hospital?
Hospital-type diaper, we call them, something
Okay,
like that.
hospital-type diaper, that's what it's on, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And so before you put that hospital-type diaper on the bench, you bleach it.
Yes,
And the purpose of bleaching it is to make sure that you get rid of biological material that could contain DNA.
yes,
All right. Then you put the hospital-type blue, what should we call it, blanket,
sure.
on the bench.
Okay.
Then what's that white paper on top of the blue hospital blanket?
Okay. The way I'm processing this case, the way I process this case, and other cases certainly too, I would put down a new one of these blue pads for each one of the items that I looked at. Keep in mind that each item is, in general, each item is a coin envelope that contains 2 bindles. So inside this coin envelope are 2 bindles. One of the bindles would contain the swatch with the blood stain on it. The other bindle would contain the substrate control. So I would change this blue pad between each one of those coin envelopes. So now, when I would open the coin envelope, before I would open the coin envelope, there would also be one of these white Kim wipes. It's just a piece of white tissue, a large size tissue, like a Kleenex somewhat.
Is that the white,
Yes,
Chem wipe is the white, larger white object on top of the blue blanket?
Yes, and so I would process the bindle containing the stain on top of one Chem wipe, and then I would change the Chem wipe and then process the next bindle containing the substrate control with a new Chem wipe.
So what you're actually doing there is that just for one item, all right, one item that contains the swatch with the specimen on it and the substrate control, between the substrate control and the specimen, you would change the surface you were working on, that Chem wipe.
Yes, in most cases, I think on some of these it may have just been one Chem wipe, but I'm working on it. You can see it's a large Chem wipe, so I'd work on 2 different areas of it.
But either different areas or you change the Chem wipe.
Yes.
All right, what would be, and the manila envelope there, that's to replicate the coin envelope?
Yes, that's to replicate the coin envelope.
All right, and on the upper left-hand, well, I guess it's the upper right-hand corner of the screen, we see another one of those blue hospital blankets.
Yes.
And what's on that?
Excuse me. Well, that would now contain that orange object is a test tube rack. And so as I process these test tubes, I would place each tube individually into that rack. In other words, once you put a stain swatch into a test tube, then it's capped and placed into that rack so it's out of the way of the other material. And then also on there you can see there's another little chem wipe that has a little blue plastic tube popper on it. That's used to pop these tubes open so that way you don't do it with your glove, you do it with the tube popper. And then finally, I think I'm laying out another chem wipe that would have the capped unused tubes. In other words, where I would get the new tubes from, because those come out of an autoclave jar at one point, and then you would lay some of those out capped, ready to go.
I'm sorry, finished. Just use the word autoclave. Could you tell the jury what an autoclave is?
Yes, it's a process whereby reagents and equipment is steam sterilized. In other words, it takes things up to a very high temperature to sterilize.
And the purpose of that is?
Well, the purpose of that is to destroy biological material and to break DNA down into very small, very small fragments.
Helps prevent cross-contamination.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go back to you say a scissors in your hand,
Yes,
and that's in your right hand. What's in your left hand?
that would be my forceps.
All right. And you were asked some questions on direct examination about your forceps. Sometimes people call them tweezers, or like
Yes,
tweezers.
tweezers.
Now, are your tweezers serrated?
No.
They're like the tweezers or the forceps that jewelers use. They're ground down, correct?
Yes, they're like those.
And it's your understanding that forensic DNA scientists that do the work you do will employ such ground down forceps.
Yes, that's not just DNA, that's from conventional serology days.
Conventional serology days.
Yes.
It's a general practice among criminalists to avoid handling samples with serrated tweezers, because the problem with serrated tweezers is that they're harder to clean.
They are harder to clean, yes.
Okay, so please go on and tell us about what you're doing there.
Well, I'm just proceeding to cut into this sample is what I would be doing. And I think that's it.
Okay, great. Let's move on to C.
Okay.
What are you doing here?
There, you can see the tap is running, and I'm washing my forceps.
Or what are you washing them in at that point?
That's just tap water. In other words, that's a big gush of water to get any of the bulk material off.
All right, so you start with the water to get the bulk material off. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Let's move to D. What are you doing in D?
I'm wiping my forceps with a chem wipe.
What are you doing in E?
Now, at this point, this is the next part of the cleaning process where I'm actually rinsing them down with a little spray bottle of alcohol.
And what are you doing in F?
This is the flaming process. Whenever that Bunsen burner was lit, people in the laboratory knew that Dr. Blake and I were working together. But that is used to what we call fire or flame the actual tools, and that's sort of a final, ultimate killer of anything. I mean, it would certainly carbonize any biological material that may be left over.
And you would do this between each item?
Yes, and that would be even between each substrate control, of course, too.
You go from the specimen, and you would go through this cleaning procedure?
Yes.
Including the last part of the autoclaving or using the Bunsen burner?
Yes,
And then you would move to the specimen, or specimen substrate control, you clean in between.
yes.
And the last picture, which I know you didn't want me to show, that's you in the lab, right?
Yes, this is a picture of me in the laboratory. That's my U.
Okay, thank you.
That's your U?
Yes, the shape of the bench is a U, so we call those U's.
What's our timing? I can't even remember. Did we take a break, or we're moving right through?
We're just
I forgot if we took
moving
a
along,
break.
4:30.
Okay. let's now move to the Bundy blood drops.
Okay.
Now, plastic bags. In your opinion, sir, putting a wet swatch, or swatches, in a plastic bag, folds over, then putting that plastic bag in a coin envelope, putting it on the floor of a crime scene truck for 7 hours in the month of June. I won't say anything about, just make assumptions about the temperature being something on the order of in the 60s in Brentwood.
I
In
grew
Los
up in
Angeles.
LA, so I know
Okay.
I know what June is like. It's usually a little overcast part of the morning. And it's
Well,
better
why don't
sun.
we assume it's about 11 or 12 o'clock in the afternoon?
Okay, the skies are starting to lighten up. People are heading for the beach.
And it's in a crime scene truck,
Okay.
and it's there for 7 hours
Okay.
before opened.
Okay.
Would you agree that putting swatches in a plastic bag, wet blood swatches, in that fashion would have the effect of degrading the DNA in those samples?
Provided that there was some bacterial action, for example, that came with the substrate material, yes, that could get that process going.
And the bacterial agents could be on, you saw some pictures on direct examination about the locations of items 47, which was photo number 117, 48, photo number 118, 49, photo number 119, 50, photo number 120, and 52, I think, photo number 122. You saw those,
Yes.
those blood drops, right?
Yes.
You saw the substrates.
Yes.
Would you have a reasonable expectation that those, that swatches made from those blood drops would contain biological, bacterial agents that when put, those swatches put in the plastic bag, kept there for 7 hours, moist and wet, would begin a process of bacterial degradation?
Yes. In other words, if this is a blood sample, then the bacteria would feed on the blood, and yes.
In your opinion, is a sound practice to collect wet blood swatches of this kind containing from substrates that have some dirt, put them in plastic bags, the truck in my hypothetical, for 7 hours? Is that a sound practice?
I don't think it's a good idea to leave them that long.
Because that could have the effect of causing severe degradation of the samples.
Well, it could certainly lead to degradation. The severity is, I'm not sure of.
Well, because it's hard to predict exactly how extensive the process of degradation might be.
Well, I don't know if it's that hard to predict. I mean, bacteria have certain growth cycles, and people have characterized these things quite well. So I think you could do the experiment. I think you just don't know exactly how much is in the starting material. That's what would be hard to predict.
You conducted yield gels of the blood drops from Bundy.
Yes.
And the result of your yield gels indicated that they contained lots of bacterial DNA.
Well, that's what it suggested, although one should keep in mind we did not do a specific test for bacteria, but that's what I interpreted to be the most likely cause.
There, in these yield gels, I think that, did you see that part of Dr. Cotton's testimony where she put a yield gel up there for the jury?
I may have seen that, yes. I think I did.
The bottom of, that's one of those gels where they have some bands that are standards,
Yes.
that have a certain degree of intensity,
Yes.
and then you compare the smears in the lanes for the specimens to the standards.
Yes.
And sometimes at the bottom of those bands, there's something that are called plasmids.
Yes, I think those may be plasmids, although I'm not sure those are plasmids.
Why don't you tell the jury what a plasmid is?
Yes, a plasmid is a relatively small piece of circular DNA that's usually found inside a bacterium. It's separate from the bacterial DNA, but it's goes along for the ride with the bacterium.
And on the yield gels, when one can identify areas that look like plasmid bands.
Well, the point is, I know the bands you're speaking of, and I believe they are of bacterial origin. Whether they're plasmids or not, I'm not sure.
But those bands indicate to you that there was substantial bacterial degradation in the Bundy blood drops.
Well, that would suggest to me that there's substantial bacteria. For example, when we look at a vaginal swab from a case, you'll frequently see bacteria, but that doesn't mean that the female's DNA is degraded.
Now, after the yield gel for these Bundy drops, you conducted something that you described before as a southern transfer process.
Yes.
And that was done to determine if you could identify the amount of human DNA that were in these samples.
Yes.
And and you were able to get some, and then you did what's known as a slot plot.
Yes.
Did you do that before? I think you did that before or after the southern transfer.
On one of the times we did it after. I think another time we may have done it before.
But, finished. But the slot plot is a way of determining the amount of human DNA
Yes.
in the specimen.
Yes.
And so what we had in these Bundy blood drops was a substantial amount of bacterial DNA
Yes.
and some amount of human DNA.
Yes.
And from those tests, you can't tell how the amount of human DNA got there.
That's correct.
Now let's talk about how much human DNA you were able to identify in these samples.
Okay.
Now, for sample 47, you received 2 swatches.
I believe that's correct, but I'd like to check my notes on that point.
All right. If I may approach the witness, I have a chart that may assist him.
Do you want to show that to Mr. Harmon? Mr. Sheck? Mr. Sheck?
It's my own book notes.
Well, if you're going to show it to the witness, you have to show it to...
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Can I get a copy of it? Sure. I've never seen it before. Can I have a chance to review it too, Your Honor?
Sure. Mrs. Robertson, you want to...
You know what, Your Honor, just to save time rather than do that, he's going to look it up. You're going to look this up. You're not going to take my word what's on this chart, are you? You're going to look it up in your own notes?
Mr. Sheck, I'd take your word for anything.
Well, why don't you just
I'll look it up.
look it up?
But just to make sure we're connecting here. Now, this was with regards to number 47?
47.
Okay. I had, by the way, prepared a little spreadsheet that just is a roadmap to my notes. That's what I'm looking at to find these
Maybe I
things.
could look at that.
Sure.
Objection.
Swatches.
Objection. That is a
Yes.
humongous discovery issue, and they did it on purpose. They had this note spreadsheet to all of his notes, and they did not share it, and they did it on purpose. Sanctions. I want sanctions. I want sanctions right now.
And they weighed 8.5 milligrams.
This is now number 47.
47.
Okay, that would be correct.
And the weight extracted by you was 4.7 milligrams.
Yes, I took the larger piece.
And you got 4.34 nanograms of human DNA.
I'm sorry, you asked me how many, what was the quantity?
4.34 by the slot plot.
That sounds about right. I had about 3.8 after I did the quantitation. When Dr. Blake and I would review these quantitations, I went back and figured out he went back and figured out the total yields, I believe, but what my notes would reflect was probably how much was left after I had done the quantitation, because that's what I had left to work with. So that sounds about right, about 4 nanograms.
Yeah, 4.34.
I'd go for that.
Now let's assume that there were 5 other swatches associated with sample 47 weighing 28 milligrams. And let's further assume that the biological matter, the blood, was randomly or evenly distributed over those other swatches.
That's quite an assumption sometimes, if you're talking about
Just
uniform.
assume that.
Okay.
Objection is improper hypothetical, there's no foundation for it.
Overruled.
And let's further assume that, maybe this will be the easiest assumption to just make and quantify. Let's just assume that out of all the material associated with sample 47, all 7 swatches, you extracted 12.9 or 13% of the DNA.
Okay.
Would you project then that associated with all the swatches, there would be about 33.6 nanograms?
Well, without a calculator, I wouldn't assume that, but.
About in that area.
Okay, say again, your amount was?
That you had about 12.9 or 13% of the sample,
Okay.
that if we were to calculate, thank you, Your Honor, if we were to calculate the total amount of human DNA in the sample, it would come to something on the order of 33.6
Well,
nanograms.
yeah, that sounds about right. It'd
All
be
right.
about 10 times what I had, so, yeah,
Now let's try sample 48.
okay.
You received 2 swatches weighing 8.1 milligrams. Extracted 6.5 and got a slot blot of 4 nanograms.
Again, let me check that. Okay, this is item number
48.
48. Okay. And you said about 4, is that right?
4.
Okay.
So, based on the weight, assuming that you extracted 80% of the total amount in those 2 swatches, if you were to project total amount of DNA on the swatches, it would be 5 nanograms.
Yeah, I can eyeball that.
All right. Let's turn to sample 49.
Okay.
You received about 2 swatches and I think something like a thread that weighed 4.6 milligrams altogether.
Well, now keep in mind on 49, there were 2 different submissions on that, but you're talking about the initial one.
Yeah. Well, to cut to the bottom line, let's assume that there were altogether 5 swatches
Okay.
associated with this sample, weighing a total of 19.6 milligrams. You extracted 2.5 milligrams and got a quant of 0.24 nanograms, which would mean that your quantification represents 13% of the total sample extracted, and therefore the total amount of human DNA in the sample would be on the order of 1.8 nanograms.
That sounds about right, yes.
Let's turn to item 50.
Okay.
You received 1 swatch weighing 7.2 milligrams.
Okay.
Assume that there's a total of 4 swatches with a total weight of 22.2 milligrams.
Okay.
The weight of your extraction is 3.6.
Wait, I'm sorry, back up. There were a total of how many swatches?
4.
4. Okay. And mine was 7.2?
Right.
Okay.
And the total weight is 22.2 mil.
Oh, wait, if there's 4 and I've got 7.2,
Mhm.
doesn't it have to be closer to about 30 milligrams?
Is this a hypothetical, or if it is, there's no foundation for it, it's
No.
a proper hypothetical?
Well, it's a little late now that we've gone through several.
Well, better late than never, Your Honor.
That's true.
Uh,
Why don't you re-ask the question, clarify with Mr. Sims?
why don't we just, the weight you extracted was 3.6 milligrams.
Oh, okay, what I extracted was 3.6. Okay, that's where,
And
Okay.
assume that's 16% of the total.
okay.
Objection. Is that a hypothetical? If it
I'm
is,
asking
there's
to
no-
assume that.
There's no basis for it. Objection on that basis.
Sustained.
Your Honor, you're aware that all the swatches were weighed in this case at your laboratory at Sunmark Diagnostics.
Objection. Calls for hearsay, it's compound.
Sustained.
Your Honor, as subject to connection,
Go over there in the corner and throw your tantrum. Throw your little hissy fit. But, Your Honor, I want to ask him this question.
All right, good morning, Mr. Sims.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Mr. Sims, you, sir, are reminded you are still under oath, and Mr. Scheck, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Morning, Mr. Sims. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm fine.
We left off yesterday talking about the amounts of DNA in samples found at the Bundy crime scene, some from June 13th, some from one from July 3rd.
Yes.
Now, in terms of RFLP testing, your protocol indicates that you would like to have as much as 150 nanograms to do an RFLP test.
Well, we'd like to have even more than that if we could get it. It makes the turnaround time a lot faster.
But the statement in your protocol is that you're ideally looking for at least 150 nanograms.
No, I believe that misstates the
Scheck should do something that would help with Judge Ito. Yeah, maybe, Josh, maybe he threw such a fit that court was closed down for the day. But we are on May 19th. So, I got a 27-year-old downstairs right now. And she has not been taking care of her cats. So I went down to yell at her today, right before my stream. I went down to yell at my 27-year-old, right? She was wearing a kitty cat onesie, ears, tail, hood was up. How do you yell at someone like that? She's only this big. So I did it. I couldn't. We had a discussion, but no, there was no mean yelling involved. Now Scheck should wear that. If he would just wear that when Judge Ito is about to lay into him, Judge Ito would just not be able to. I promise you, it's impossible to do it. I tried, and trust me, I can yell. I can yell it just like that. Just like that, I can start yelling. Sometimes I start yelling for no reason at all, just to keep them on their toes. You know, that I have to make sure they know who's boss. But if they have little kitty cat onesies on, little ears, and a tail when they turn their back on you, and no, okay, that's what he should get.
protocol.
You tell me.
Well, what we'd like to have is at least 50. But if we had our druthers, we'd like to put, say, about 400 on the gel.
But it would be a fair statement that 50 nanograms is about as low as you like to go with an RFLP test.
With some of the newer probes, we're even getting down into the 25 nanogram range. Dr. Badoli from the FBI has recently published an article in which one of the newer probes, this D5S110, was shown to be as sensitive as, down to 25 nanograms, maybe even 10 nanograms. So the sensitivities have been improved on some of the probes. But yes, ideally we'd like about 50 at minimum.
Well, you recall discussing these issues in August.
Yes, I do.
And in August, did you indicate that 50 nanograms is about as low as we like to go with the RFLP procedures? In other words, the sensitivity is pretty weak below 50 nanograms.
Yes.
Now, would you agree that in a drop of blood, there's about 1,000 nanograms of human DNA?
Yes, the recovery would be in a drop of blood would be about 1,000 nanograms, which is about a microgram of DNA, yes.
And in a microliter of DNA, you would expect to find about 20 nanograms.
Microliter
you
of
said-
DNA.
A microliter of blood, my apologies.
In a microliter of blood, yes, it would be about 20 nanograms.
And a microliter of blood would produce a spot about the size of a pinhead.
Yes.
So these Bundy drops, at best, 52, has the human DNA equivalent to a pinhead's worth of blood.
Objection, that's argumentative. It's vague.
Rephrase the question.
Excuse me.
Assuming that number 52, that is the LAPD item number from which the RFLP was performed.
Okay,
Is that right?
yes.
Assuming that that has on the order of 25 to 30 nanograms of human DNA.
Objection, that's improper, hypothetical, inconsistent with the test.
Sustain.
And assuming it has something on the order of 31.5 nanograms of human DNA.
Same objection.
Sustain.
Well, you would agree that 20 nanograms.
I don't know now that I think about it. I don't think a little kitty cat outfit with little tiny pointed ears and a tail would work. Because he wears those big boy suits that are just way too large for him, that makes him look like a child pretending to be a lawyer, which is outstandingly cute. A little 9-year-old pretending to be a lawyer in a little suit, yes sir. Halloween costume all day long. I'll give you all my candy. I'll steal every other kid's candy just to give it to you for wearing that. And that has no effect on the judge, even though it's so darn cute that he's trying so hard to be a lawyer. So the kitty cat outfit probably would not work.
Would come
Shadow.
from 1 microliter of blood.
1 fresh microliter of blood, not
Fresh.
necessarily a blood stain,
Right, 1 fresh microliter of blood.
right?
And that's the size of a pinhead.
That's right, but now you're talking about a volume of blood as opposed to if you were to spot about, I think I mentioned yesterday, if you were to look at a blood stain of about 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, which is about a pinhead, you'd usually recover about 2 nanograms. So it's the recovery is not always the same. I mean, it's one thing to talk about a stain and, excuse me, how much DNA you'd get out of a stain versus if you were to look at the DNA in a volume of liquid blood.
Right.
There is a difference.
There is a difference, and the difference is, has to do with the DNA content of the volume you're dealing with.
Well, no, I'm trying to distinguish between a volume of liquid whole blood
Yes.
and what you can extract out of that versus what you typically would get out of a blood stain on a garment or something like that.
But the point is that to the extent that you put you extract DNA from amount of blood, right?
Yes.
The amount of DNA you can get out of the amount of the volume of blood is dependent on the number of cells within that volume of blood from which you can extract DNA.
Yes.
And if you have blood with a comparatively high content of DNA per volume, you're going to get a bigger yield.
Yes.
And so if you cross-contaminate a degraded sample with blood that has more DNA, you're going to get a bigger yield from the contaminant that has a greater amount of DNA in that volume of blood.
Can you,
Testimony's compound.
I'm not sure I understand that question.
All right, let's try it again. You have a degraded sample, okay?
Okay.
Well, let's do it this way. There are volumes of blood that have higher DNA content than other volumes of blood.
Yes, we saw that in this case, for example, with the reference samples.
Right. And so if there's a transfer of a volume of blood with a high DNA content onto a sample where the DNA has been degraded to the point where it is not detectable, you with me?
Yes.
You're going to get a yield in terms of nanograms of DNA that might be, for example, higher than you would expect to find on a blood swatch that had been degraded.
Yes, I think I understand. I was following you well until the very end there. Are you saying that if you took a blood volume of liquid from a person that had a high level of DNA and then that got onto the degraded stain, then that would be higher than if you took a person that had a lower level of DNA to begin with and got that onto the stain?
Going back to that whole discussion we had yesterday, remember the charts about some volumes of blood have higher DNA content than others.
Well, I think what you're saying is some people at different times, their bloods are different. For example, you may have more white blood cells than I have. Is that what
No.
you're saying? Okay,
No.
I'm lost.
All right. I'm talking about, you agreed, I think you're saying, that you would expect to find, for example, in a reference tube, in the volume of blood in a reference tube, a higher yield of DNA content from a volume than you would from a stain that had been
picked up off a dirty substrate and put in a plastic bag and degraded
Oh, okay.
for 7
Yes.
hours,
Yes,
right?
the answer to that is yes.
Yes, okay. And so when you take blood from samples that have a higher DNA content, right, assume the blood has a higher DNA content, you cross-contaminate it onto something else that has virtually no DNA content or not a detectable DNA content, you're going to get the yield from the volume of blood that has the higher DNA content.
Objections, compound, it's unintelligible.
Do you understand the question, Mr. Sims?
Actually, that one I think I do.
All right, go ahead.
I think the answer to that is yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, let's do this. One of us can be Marcia from the preliminary hearings with the longer curly hair. Another of us could be Marcia from the early trial, short curly hair. Another of us could be Marcia now, short straight hair. And then one of us should be Marcia Brady.
You talked yesterday about substrate controls.
Yes.
And Mr. Harmon asked you a lot of questions about that. Do you recall those?
Yes, I do.
All right. And one purpose you talked about of a substrate control is to swatch a section near a stain in order to see if there is some cellular material near that stain.
Yes, in other words, if there may be some background DNA that may contribute to what you might see in a stain.
Right. But you were suggesting that a substrate control could also serve another purpose in terms of giving us some information about the possibility of cross-contamination in the handling of samples.
Objection is argumentative, what are you suggesting?
Sustain, rephrase the question.
Where you asked a series of questions yesterday by Mr. Harmon, and you gave answers indicating that you thought the substrate controls could be looked at to give us some information about the possibility of cross-contamination in the handling of samples.
Well,
Objection? Yeah, you remember what the basis was, Your Honor. That's misleading. That misstates his testimony of yesterday.
Oh, well,
I think it doesn't just give you some information. I think it gives you a great deal of information about how those samples were processed.
All right, and you answered, you were asked questions about, well, let's forget how you were asked questions. Let's try it this way. You gave testimony that the substrates controls might give us information about whether or not laboratory criminalists, when they handled the swatches at the crime laboratory, cross-contaminated samples.
Yes.
And that would include the point where the swatches were taken out of, were wet and taken out of the plastic bags with the test tubes.
Yes, and assuming they went through the entire process.
And it would include the portion of the process where the wet swatches were put into the test tubes.
Yes.
And it would include the part of the process where the next morning the swatches were taken out of the test tubes with the pipette.
Yes, assuming they all went through the same process.
And would include that part of the process where the swatches were then folded into the bindles.
Again, the same answer.
Now, looking at that portion of the process, the answers you gave yesterday to the questions were based specifically on the assumption that the substrate controls, I think these were your words, were systematically alternated between the specimen samples and the substrate controls.
I believe that was my understanding.
You used the word
yes.
systematically alternated,
wait,
correct?
wait.
I thought he finished.
You walked over his answer. He
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
finished yet. Also, Mr. Sims, take a breath before you start answering his question. All right, proceed.
Thank you.
Yes, my answer was that my understanding was that they were systematically taken in these steps.
Well, let's put it another way. You were basing your answers on the assumption that the criminalist systematically alternated between handling the specimen, then the substrate control, then the series of specimen swatches, and the substrate control, the series of specimen swatches, the subcase control, etc., right?
Yes.
And the reason that is, and that's a critical assumption to your notion that these substrate controls can give us information about cross-contamination.
Objection, that misstates his testimony, Your Honor.
Sustain, rephrase the question.
All right. The idea of a control giving you information about cross-contamination is that the control must be handled in parallel or in the same way that you handle the specimens.
Objection, that's vague in what context you're in.
Overruled.
Well, the answer to that would be that whenever you're processing samples, whether it be stain, substrate control, stain, one does look to the order of the processing, because if the inference is that something here cross-contaminated the next one, well, then it doesn't make sense that this one down here was cross-contaminated from something up here.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, precisely, and that's the reason that you're saying that one might be able to draw conclusions about cross-contamination is because you are assuming that there was systematic alternation in the handling of the specimens. In other words, the substrates controls were handled in parallel in a systematic alternation with the specimens.
Objection, it's vague in terms of what's in parallel and what part of the process we're talking about.
Overruled. Do you understand the question?
I think I do. I think if you're talking about just the substrate controls, then the alternation is part of that. What I was talking about too, though, was that you're looking at how things are processed and the idea of what could potentially get contaminated down the line.
Yes, but
So that could be stain, 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 too.
But your answers yesterday, you used the word, with respect to the questions, you're assuming that the substrate controls in the specimens were handled with a systematic alternation.
Yes.
Objection,
Now-
Your Honor, it's vague in terms of there are different parts of this, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Now let's
But
talk.
we have asked that now.
No, I want to just make sure this concept clear. Let's talk about, just for an example, a reagent control.
Okay.
The reagent control is the one where you're at the point of extraction in the PCR process,
Yes.
and you're putting into the tubes the different reagents that go into the PCR mix.
Yes.
And so you have one tube, for example, that has the maybe a specimen that has a swatch with blood on it.
Okay.
Is that what happens?
Yes, the only thing I think we mixed up on was when you mentioned the PCR mix. You're actually talking about the extraction now.
All right, yes.
It's an extraction.
I'm talking about the stuff you put into the tube.
Okay. This is now to get the DNA out of the samples.
Yes.
So that's an extraction.
Okay.
Okay.
But the reagent control is that you take a tube without any swatch in it and you put the reagents in it, right?
Yes.
And when you do that, you do it in parallel with all the other specimens,
Well, you're actually doing it in sequence.
in
correct?
sequence,
Yes.
right? In other words, you're going to make sure that you're taking the reagents to make up this control from the same batch, same lots, the same time, as you're creating the reagents for the other tubes, right?
Yes.
And that's what gives you some confidence that the control would work, because you're running that reagent control in parallel or handling it in the same way that you're handling all the other specimens.
Yes.
And that's what gives you the information about whether or not there may be some contaminant in the reagents that were used.
Yes.
So it would be of no particular use if you took the reagents from a run you did in the afternoon and then used that and ran that one. That wouldn't tell you about whether you had contamination on a previous run, would it?
Well, I'm not sure I understand that, because are we talking about the same reagents?
Well, that would be the question. Are we talking about this? Let me get it in another way.
Okay.
If the substrate controls here were not handled with systematic alternation, you with me?
As far as the evidence processing now.
As far as the handling of the evidence is concerned, all right?
Yes.
And let's say that a series of specimen swatches were handled in a batch,
Okay.
and maybe a series of control swatches were handled in a batch.
Okay.
That would not be the kind of systematic alternation you were talking about yesterday.
Objection, the proper hypothetical misstates the testimony.
Overruled.
In other words, if the substrate controls were processed entirely differently from the swatches themselves, is that what you're saying?
We don't need the word entirely. Let's just say some of them were handled in a batch together, and a series of specimen items were handled in a batch together.
Objection, is made together with what?
Overruled.
Does this, I guess what I'm confused on is, do you mean now in the collection process also? Are you talking about just in the laboratory? or-
Let's just focus, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. let's just focus on handling in the laboratory.
Okay.
And the substrate controls were not handled with systematic alternation as you discussed yesterday.
Okay.
Would that not undermine the value of the substrate controls in terms of giving us any information about cross-contamination in the handling of the specimens?
I think you would have to say you don't have as much information there. That's true.
And in order to make sure that a substrate control is serving as more than just a control about what came from the substrate, but as a control that gives you information about cross-contamination, it would be a good thing if the criminalists involved understood that the substrate control would serve that function.
Are objections irrelevant beyond the scope of the
Hold.
Yes.
Because you're counting on the criminalists involved to carefully, systematically alternate their handling of the specimen samples and the substrate controls.
Well, no, I'm counting on the criminalist to do everything that the criminalist does in a careful fashion. What you're asking me is, can I make as much inference about how these things were handled retroactively, given a particular scenario? I mean, I'm not counting on that as much as I'm counting on them handling it in a careful fashion all the way down.
You're counting on them handling it in a careful fashion and doing systematic alternation. That was the way you answered the questions yesterday.
No, I'm saying if you're going to place that great reliance on the substrate controls, on the negative results from the substrate controls, if you're going to use that as an inference that then these things were processed properly, then that's correct. On the other hand, just because that wasn't done, it doesn't mean they weren't done properly.
Well, you would agree that to do this system, it would be useful to ensure that there really was systematic alternation in the handling of the substrate controls in the specimens if the criminalist performing that operation knew that it was important to systematically alternate.
Yes.
And systematic alternation of the substrate controls as a check on cross-contamination should continue not just in the handling of the samples in the laboratory, but through the process where you extract the DNA.
Yes.
And it should continue in the process of sending substrate controls, of cutting up specimens and substrate controls and sending them to other laboratories.
Objection, that's argumentative here.
Sustained goes beyond the scope of the work.
Let's try this.
Mr. Sheck.
Oh, that was my mistake. It is Exhibit number 177C, LAPD Evidence Disposition Summary. Now, the Los Angeles Police Department sent you, DOJ, sample 47, the Bundy swatch, on August 12th, 1994.
I believe that's correct, yes.
And they sent you on August 12th, 1994, sample 48, another one, some Bundy swatches, right?
Yes.
And 49 on August 12th, 94, they sent you Bundy swatches, right?
Yes.
And on August 12th, they sent you number 50, some Bundy swatches.
Yes.
And they actually sent, now, 52 was at Cellmark, right? You didn't get that on August 12th.
That's correct.
But looking at this board, you see these logos where that's the swatch with red, that represents the bloodstain swatches.
Yes.
They didn't send you the substrate controls until September 7th, 1994 for sample 47, 48, 49, or 50.
That's correct.
In fact, Mr. Sims,
Didn't you call the people at the Los Angeles Police Department and say, send me the substrate controls, because substrate controls ought to be handled with systematic alternation with the specimens as a protection against cross-contamination?
I'm sure I didn't use those words, but as I recall, a little bit of history here, this case originally started out as looking like an RFLP case because those swatches from the Bundy crime scene looked like very good bloodstains to work with in their appearance.
Mr. Sims, I don't mean to be impolite to you at all. Forgive me, but I think the answer is not
Motion to strike,
responsive.
Your Honor. I object to the speech, Your Honor.
I would move to strike his answer is not responsive and just let him answer my
Why don't you
question.
answer the question?
My question is, sir, a very simple one. Did you ask the Los Angeles Police Department to send you the substrate controls after you had first received the specimen controls without the substrate controls?
I don't know if I asked the LAPD or if I put that request through Lisa Kahn
Lisa Kahn
of the
was...
district attorney's office.
All right. So in other words, you put the request in to the district attorney's office to pass on to the LAPD to ask them to send you the substrate controls.
I may have done that, yes. I don't know if, I may have spoken to LAPD, I can't recall who I contacted.
Point is, sir, you wanted the substrate controls, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you wanted the substrate controls because when you were performing DNA analysis, you were going to make sure to systematically alternate your handling of the substrate controls and the specimen items.
No, that's not true. The reason I wanted the substrate controls was because this was clearly a PCR issue, and I wanted to make sure that we had negative substrate controls to make the proper interpretations of the bloodstains.
When you got the substrate controls in September, and you went through the rest of the analysis, you would treat the substrate control in parallel with the specimen when performing your DNA analysis.
Well, for most of this evidence, I did, but I did some processing of those early samples without the substrate controls,
Because you didn't have them.
because I did not have them.
And if you had them, you would have processed the substrate controls in the same fashion that you processed the specimens.
Yes, I would.
In the same fashion is vague, Your Honor.
Thank you. Now, talking about the issue of substrate controls, you performed analysis on Mr. Goldman's shirt.
Yes, I did.
Actually, I think I'm finished. And maybe while I'm playing with the board, could you maybe turn to your notes on that item?
Okay.
That would be LAPD item 81.
Yes.
And you attempted to take a substrate control from the shirt.
Well,
You cut one, I should
the
say.
correction on that would be that LAPD submitted a substrate control along with cuttings from the shirt, so I tested the cuttings.
Okay. So in other words, they cut an area which was labeled substrate control from the shirt. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you performed a PCR analysis of that substrate control.
Actually, that was performed by Renee Montgomery, but our laboratory did, yes. It was for D1S80, the PCR marker.
And you got a result of 1818 for that substrate control.
We characterized that as a trace of the 18 allele, yes.
And that would be a genotype consistent with the DNA from Nicole Brown Simpson.
Yes, it would.
And that's on Mr. Goldman's shirt.
Yes.
And did you examine the substrate control itself, that cutting?
Yes, I believe I did.
And did you see what appeared to be blood flakes on that shirt?
Yes, my notes on page 158 indicate that.
So in other words, in the substrate control on Mr. Goldman's shirt, you found flakes of blood, which using PCR typing, you were able to determine had a result that was consistent on the D1S80 system with Nicole Brown Simpson.
Yes.
Now, would that be consistent with withdrawing? You talked about how substrate controls can be evidence of samples being cross-contaminated.
Yes.
Would this finding you made on the substrate control be evidence that Mr. Goldman's shirt
had been cross-contaminated with clothing from Nicole Brown Simpson.
Objection calls for speculation, no foundation, improper hypothetical.
Overruled.
Can you repeat exactly what you were saying?
Sure. Would this finding on the substrate control of Mr. Goldman's shirt be consistent with there having been a cross-contamination with this shirt and clothing of Nicole Brown Simpson that had her blood on it?
Would it be consistent with that? In other words, is that a possibility?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that's one possibility, yes.
Other possibilities are that Mr. Goldman's body was dragged across the crime scene into an area where it came into contact with blood from Nicole Brown Simpson.
Objection, improper hypothetical.
Sustained.
Calls for speculation.
You also got control, with respect to Nicole Brown Simpson's dress,
Yes.
did you receive substrate control cuttings or did you make some?
On that particular item I did the sampling. I did not take a substrate control on that particular item because it was very bloody. The entire garment appeared to have blood, and it would seem to be hard to find an area with absolutely no blood on it.
But you did take 3 cuttings labeled G3, G5, G3, G5, and what would be the other one?
How about G6 maybe?
Yeah. And these were cuttings from around the right shoulder area.
Yes, the right upper back.
And you performed a D1S80 analysis on those cuttings, or Ms. Montgomery did.
Yes.
And you got findings of an 18 allele and a 24 allele.
On one of the cuttings, G3, it was an 18 allele with a weaker 24 allele, indicating a mixture. On G5 and G6, the type was determined to be 18, 18 with a trace of the 24 allele.
And that mixture would be consistent with DNA typings of Nicole Brown Simpson, which for D1S80 are 1818,
Yes.
and traces of DNA from Ronald Goldman, whose type for the D180 system is 2424.
Yes.
Now, Your Honor, I have another question that I want to ask this witness, but before I do, I think I need to seek some guidance from the court.
All right, with the court order, please.
Yesterday, a study by the Federal Bureau of Investigation concerning efforts to induce cross-contamination in the handling of samples.
Yes.
I think one point you...
I'll stand in the corner because I forgot myself, and that was just as interesting as the regular trial. So I was just watching. Anyway, that's my bad.
Talked about how this FBI study, they had FBI agents coughing over samples.
Well, I don't know that they were FBI agents. I think they were actually laboratory people that were not necessarily agents, but yes.
Laboratory people working for the FBI?
Well, I believe that work was done mainly by Dr. Comey, who is an employee of the FBI, and I think it was a woman by the name of Pamela Fish, who I believe is with the Chicago Police Department. I think those are the two that did those experiments.
Now, is there, to your knowledge, there's no such thing as a standardized cough
No.
by either FBI employees or employees of the Chicago Police Department?
Not that I'm aware.
But there is a difference between a cough and a sneeze, isn't there?
Yes.
And a sneeze is more likely to, forgive my bringing up the details of this, but to give you an effluent or a spray than a cough.
It could, yes.
All right. And to your knowledge, they did not sneeze on any samples.
To my knowledge, I don't recall that being in the table. No, I think it was more of the cough.
Now, there was discussion in that study of saliva.
Yes.
And they did find that saliva mixed with blood, that actually the amount of DNA that you'll get from the saliva mixture is 2 times the amount that you would get from the blood.
I don't recall it being 2 times, but yes, the saliva could make a significant contribution.
And scientifically, that makes sense to you, doesn't it? Because saliva, in terms of its volume, has a higher concentration of DNA than blood.
Well, I think saliva can have a lot of DNA in it because of the cells that line the mouth, but there is tremendous variation, just as there is from cough to cough, from spit to spit.
Well, in general, no matter if you compare somebody's spit to somebody's blood, right, in equal volumes, you're going to find more DNA in the spit than the blood.
You may well find more, but again, it varies.
Well, in blood, the DNA comes from the white cells.
That's correct.
And but over 50% of the cellular material in blood is red cells.
Yes, something like that. Well, no, what did you say, over 50? Yes, well over 50%.
Well over 50%.
Yes.
And the red cells do not have a nucleus,
That's correct.
so they don't have DNA in them.
That's correct.
And the DNA in the blood comes from the white cells.
Yes,
And that's about 1% of the cellular material in blood.
something like that, yes.
And just to illustrate it, the kinds of things you do in the laboratory, there's something called a centrifuge.
Yes,
And so you would take like a test tube of blood and you'd spin it around.
yes,
And what would happen is that the cellular material would go to the bottom of the tube.
well, the red cells tend to sediment, and then the white cells tend to form a layer on top.
Right. And so that you see a sediment of the red cells at the bottom of the tube.
Yes, and occupying a lot of the tube at that point.
And then there's a thin film that I think people in your line of work call a buffy coat.
Yes, that's called the Buffy coat.
And that's where you'll have the white blood cells.
Yes,
And then I guess there's something yellowish on the top. That's sort of the serum, the platelets.
yes, the serum of the plasma, yes.
Now, let's take a centrifuge tube and spin it around with saliva.
Okay,
And at the bottom of that, you'd see a sediment of the epithelial cells, right?
yes.
The epithelial cells are the cells from skin,
Well, and also they're the ones that line the mouth, for
the
example.
inside of the mouth, right?
Right, they're different than the ones that would be on your epidermis, for example.
Right. And the epithelial cells that you get from the saliva, if you looked at the bottom of the test tube, that would be what you'd see at the bottom.
Yes,
And so if you were to just take a volume of blood and a volume of saliva, typically, right?
Yes.
Spin it around in those tubes, right?
Yes.
You look at that Buffy coat, which would be the amount of the white cells or the amount of DNA you could get out of that volume of blood, right?
right,
And typically compare it to the other tube where you would have the cells from the epithelial cells from the saliva, right?
yes.
If it's the same volumes, you would expect to see more DNA from the epithelial cells in the saliva, typically.
Well, the problem with saliva is it's not like blood. Blood tends to be more typical in that when you draw it out of the arm, people's bloods all tend to look alike. Their DNA content may vary, but they tend to look alike. But saliva does vary a lot because we take saliva samples from, for example, suspects and victims in sexual assault cases. So you look at these things and you see a lot of variation. But there can be, to make this short, there can be a significant amount of epithelial cells in saliva.
Right. So to get back to our FBI study, right?
Okay?
You would be more likely to find epithelial cells from the effluent of a sneeze, wouldn't you, than a cough?
Well, if I mean, you have to remember, some people, when they cough, they really hack a lot, and so they may be producing a lot of phlegm.
Let's getting to the bottom line here. In terms of this FBI study, I think it might have been a reasonable idea, instead of having some undefined kind of coughing, to have somebody sneeze.
Yes,
Objection, it's irrelevant.
Overruled. Angela stand. Proceed.
Now,
yes, I think, okay.
Talking again about that FBI study, bottom line here, the samples involved in that study, right? The samples that they were looking at in terms of trying to see whether there were cross-contamination did not involve the graded samples, did it?
That's correct. That's my understanding.
And the discussion that we've been having here has to do with the possibility of cross-contamination of one set of samples that are degraded.
Yes.
Now, you gave some testimony about false positives versus false negatives.
Yes.
And you were asked, is it your opinion that a typing error in the PCR process is more likely to result in a false exclusion than an inclusion?
Generally, yes.
Well, that was the question you were asked yesterday.
Yes.
Now, your experience is in forensic DNA typing.
Yes.
And I take it that your answer was based on your experience in forensic DNA typing.
Yes.
And when you're doing forensic DNA typing, typically that involves a case where you will get a result, a DNA result, and then it will be introduced in court and maybe against somebody who was accused.
Or it may well give a result that exonerates some person.
Can happen, but when it's being used for purposes of incriminating, it is used for, let's put it this way. Talking about false positives and false negatives,
Yes.
there are many situations where you have what we would characterize as a positive result. That is, there is a consistency between DNA typing found on some sample and a person that's accused, and that would be called, let's say, a, quote, positive result.
Yes, you can use it in that context.
And you had that in mind when you were answering the false positive question yesterday.
Yes.
Now, when you're using PCR typing for purposes of making a diagnosis in a clinical test,
Objection, it's irrelevant.
Sustained.
oh, no, you were asked yesterday about, in this connection, about, you made reference to an article by Dr. Sensabaugh concerning false positive rates in PCR typing.
Objection, that misstates the testimony. There was no such testimony in rates.
Sustained.
Do you know what the false positive rates are for PCR typing in clinical medicine?
No.
Do you know, you were asked questions comparing forensic typing in DNA typing in forensics and clinical medicine yesterday by Mr. Harmon.
Yes.
All right. And let's just talk about what you do know with respect to the use of forensic typing in clinical medicine.
Okay.
Do you know if PCR typing in clinical medicine is used to do a diagnosis of, let's say, do you know what a pap smear is?
Yes.
All right. A situation where an analysis might be done on a pap smear to see whether or not somebody might have a tumor that is either malignant or benign.
Objection, irrelevant, beyond the scope.
Sustained.
When PCR typing is used as a screening device in clinical medicine, do you know if it is used in situations to make an assessment as to whether or not somebody, where you will make a prediction based on the typing result as to whether or not somebody has, let's say, a certain genetic disease?
Objection, irrelevant, beyond the scope, no foundation.
Sustained.
Do you know if in clinical medicine using PCR typing, one can make a comparison of what the DNA typing result is and compare it later to whether or not the typing result accurately predicted the outcome?
Your Honor.
Sustained.
Objection.
Foundation. Sustained.
I'm asking if he knows.
It's beyond the scope as well, counsel.
Using forensic DNA typing in the context of a criminal case, the only way that you can find out if you have a false positive is if
some other evidence emerges afterwards which would indicate that the DNA typing was incorrect.
Objection, it's argumentative, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Well, you're aware of the CACLD studies.
Yes.
And in the first round of CACLD studies, 2 laboratories, Cellmark, Forensic Science Associates, got false positives.
Objections beyond the scope, no foundation, may call for hearsay.
Sustained.
Do you know if Cellmark and Forensic Science Associates
Counsel, I'm sustaining the objection on a hearsay basis at this point.
have you read the results, the report of the CACLD study?
Objections irrelevant beyond the
Just
scope.
first question.
Overruled.
No.
Have you read reports of that study?
I have read some information about that study, yes.
And the information that you've read about that study, do you rely upon it?
Objections vague, rely on what, for what reason?
Sustained.
Have you relied upon it in forming your opinion about the reliability of forensic DNA typing?
Still vague, counsel. Relied on what article specifically?
Have you relied on the literature you have read concerning the CACLD studies?
Still sustained. We're not identifying what it is we're referring to.
Or what is it that you've read with respect to the CACLD studies?
Well, for example, Dr. Blake,
May call for hearsay. That does call for hearsay, Your Honor.
No, what he has read regarding the CACLD study is not hearsay. Overruled.
You may
well, I know, for example, that Dr. Blake mentioned it in the casework article, the experience he had and why it was better, where he found it was better to shift to the reverse dot block.
No, the only question is, what have you read with regards to the CACLD study?
Have you read any? Yeah, I'm
All
sorry.
right,
go ahead.
Dr. Blake's article, we've
What
established
else
that.
have you read?
I think there's a mention of the CACLD study in the NRC report, and I think there's a mention of it in, I recall reading something about it, I think in Dr. Thompson's article.
In what you've read, would you rely upon those articles that you've read in terms of their accuracy in reporting what occurred in the CACLD study?
Sustained.
Would you rely upon what you've read in terms of forming your
Excuse me,
opinion?
counsel. The way you're phrasing that question, it's never going to work.
Oh, okay. Then I have to find another way.
I guess so. All right, this doesn't look particularly fruitful here.
Well,
The jury has already heard about the CACLD study and has also heard testimony from Selmar.
right.
So let's
To your knowledge, in proficiency tests performed by the CACLD, were there more false positives than false negatives?
Objection calls for hearsay. It's beyond the scope.
sustain.
I don't recall.
Oh, you can't answer.
Sustain.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Sims, let's discuss for a few minutes the fingernails.
Okay.
Now, you told us that you had considerable experience in conventional serology.
Yes.
And how many years was that?
Well, in conventional serology, I actually started doing conventional serology back in 1976, so I guess I did that for about 14 years, something like that.
And have you worked with the EAP system?
Yes, I have.
And I believe you've told us that, well, withdrawn. And the EAP system looks at enzymes within the red blood cells.
Yes, it does.
And forensic DNA testing with DQ alpha or polymarkers would be looking at nucleated cells, correct?
That's correct.
And I think you've already told us that in terms of blood, only 1% of blood contains the white cells that has the nuclear DNA.
Something like that. I know that figure a little differently from my knowledge, but it's on that order.
Mm-hmm.
Blood is mostly red cells. That's the point, and very few white cells by comparison.
When you opened the packages that contain the fingernail scrapings, you received the packages that contain the fingernail scrapings and the clippings.
Yes.
And you opened them up and you looked at them when you received them at the lab.
Yes, I did.
And at that time, you were aware that
Mr. Matheson had conducted EAP testing and conventional serology testing on scrapings?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And were you aware of his results, reported results?
Yes, I believe I was aware of that result.
And after looking at those packaged, did you then close them up without conducting any testing on them and send them back to LAPD?
Well, I did close them up, but I didn't send them back at that point.
You closed them up and you didn't perform any testing?
That's correct.
And did you have any discussions with Mr. Matheson after you closed up the packages?
I think I did. I'm not positive of that, but I think I did talk to Mr. Matheson about the fingernail scrapings.
And did you suggest that a second EAP test should be run?
Objection, cause for hearsay.
Sustained.
Well, Mr. Sims, are you aware of literature that documents a degradation pattern for the EAP system?
Yes.
And in that literature, is there any degradation pattern that shows that a
The doctor is already starting to answer the question and figure out the answer before the question even comes. Doctor, you gotta wait. Is he a doctor? No, he doesn't even have his master's yet. That was Dr. Cotton.
BA can degrade into a two-banded B pattern?
Most of the literature that I'm familiar with talks about what generally happens, although I do recall reading in the literature a citation for I think it was in one of the British laboratories where they saw a BA be mistyped as a B. And that I've seen that in the literature, not as part of a study, but as an observation.
Could you answer my question?
Well, yes, it's in there.
All right.
I've seen that. In
Have
the
you
literature.
seen in the literature any documentation of a degradation pattern where a BA degrades into a two-banded B pattern?
I don't recall seeing that unless there may have been something in one of Dr. Grinbaum's papers, but I can't cite it offhand.
And Dr. Sensabaugh is the person that's done, would you agree, the most extensive work in examining the EAP system?
I would say that Dr. Sensabaugh knows more about EAP than just about anybody.
And in his published articles, have you ever seen anything that documents a degradation pattern where a BA degrades into a two-banded B pattern? Anything he has written?
No, I can't recall seeing that.
In your own experience, in all the years that you have performed conventional serology, have you ever seen a BA degrade into a two-banded B pattern?
Well, the problem with the EAP marker, I mean, I can recall generating a lot of inconclusive results with EAP because it can be a difficult marker.
But my question, sir.
Well, let him finish his
I'm
answer.
sorry, are you finished?
Well, I think in order to do that, you have to be assured of what the type is to begin with. If you understand what I'm saying. In other words, if I have a stain, I have to be sure of the type to begin with. You'd have to do it as a research project.
Mr. Sims, I'm just talking about your experience now in typing. Have you personally ever seen a BA degrade into a two-banded B pattern? Have you ever seen that, yes or no?
Where I knew that it was a BA,
Degrade into a two-banded B pattern.
I can't recall seeing that, no.
Don't ask a question you don't know the answer to, because this happens. That just happened to you, right there in front of us. But the jury is in a coma, so they didn't hear it, but we heard it. We heard him say that.
Mr. Sims, I'd like to discuss with you PCR carryover contamination.
Okay?
Now, I'm going to start this. It's going to take a little.
Cato Jr.'s like, yes, PCR carryover contamination. Let's go. I love this subject. Oops, It's late. I went over by 2 minutes. Sorry for stealing your time, guys. Stole your time for the best part of the whole stream. uh, all right, guys. Look at Marcia. She's deep in thought. I will see you all again real soon. I already got my 11 o'clock video uploaded. It's really short. We saw it yesterday during the live stream. Bye, guys. Have a great day.